Hello everyone, my name is Kain and welcome back to the channel. If you don't know, I'm a League of Legends player, content creator and coach. Now, to keep things in line with the theme of my last couple of videos, we're going to be talking about Vladimir once again. Now, I've made matchup tier lists, combo guides, full guides. Basically, I've done many things here. I recently just made a build guide, but in today's video, we're going to be talking about a rune guide. Now, I typically don't pay too much attention to runes, like I don't typically make rune guides, as I feel like, one, it comes quite natural to the champion. I don't feel like it's that complicated, and people sometimes tend to overcomplicate it. And two, a very big part of it is personal preference. So there's really no point in like trying to copy what I go in a certain matchup or trying to copy what I like to go in general on Vladimir in terms of runes, as a very big part is going to be personal experience and personal preference. So what you really should be doing is you should take the knowledge from this video and try to experiment with it and then try to come up with your own conclusions and see what works for you. With that being said, I will go over all the runes here and give you all the knowledge that you need in order to make sure that you can start testing out the runes and that you can feel what works best for you. And maybe I can give you some advice or like some suggestions on what I like the most, and that can maybe help you out as well. So let's get started. Vladimir has multiple rune pages that are actually like viable on him, but I would say the main one, the core rune page that has always been viable on Vladimir, was Phase Rush. So we're going to start with that. Now, why is Phase Rush like the main rune page on Vladimir? Because it's the scaling rune page. Vladimir is a scaling champion. What do you do on scaling champions? You typically tend to scale. So this is the most standard rune page. Now, in order to understand this rune page, and in order to understand builds and summoner spells, what does scaling mean? What does it mean to go with scaling builds, scaling summoner spell, scaling rune? Very simple. When you scale, you play not for the lane, but you play for team fights, right? Especially as Vladimir. What stats do you need in order to play team fights correctly? Well, Vladimir has a lot of damage when he has a couple of items, but he does lack movement speed and he can become quite squishy, and his ability cooldowns are also quite high. So lack of movement speed, high cooldowns, and maybe lack of HP. So what do you want to build for, like, to become like stronger in those mid and late game team fights? Typically you want movement speed, such as Ghost in our summoner spells, or like Cosmic Drive in our builds. And then in our runes Phase Rush, for example, we want HP. And we also, so basically movement speed, HP, and ability haste to get off multiple ability rotations and getting off our W maybe more in team fights, which can be useful. So that's what we're going to be doing. So this is a team fight scaling oriented page. So Phase Rush, it gives us basically slow resistance and movement speed. We're going to go here with Nimbus Cloak, as Nimbus Cloak will give you also movement speed when activating your summoner spells. Now, in hard matchups in the mid lane, think of something like an Orianna or a Syndra, and if they have in general like a lot of AP on the enemy team, let's say they have like something like Syndra or Syndra Evelynn in the enemy team. So Syndra is not an easy matchup for you in the early game, and they also have an Evelynn. Then you might want to go with Nullifying Orb here, if you go this rune page, because this is basically a Hex Shrinker Shield, and it will definitely be useful against those type of champions. But typically, whenever I can, in like 99% of my games, I will go with Nimbus Cloak, just because it offers us more movement speed. Now, with that being said, let's go over to here, and then here we have Transcendence. Transcendence, very simple rune. It just gives us ability haste the longer the game goes on. So we want to go with that. I don't really see a point in going Absolute Focus or Celerity, especially when you go Phase Rush, as this rune page wants you to scale, and ability haste helps you a lot with doing that, so Transcendence is very important. Then here you also basically mainly have two options. You have Scorch and you have Gathering Storm. Scorch is more relevant in the early game and becomes very weak in the late game, so you basically get more damage on your abilities, but the damage is only significant in like the early stages of the game. Whereas Gathering Storm, it's the opposite. It's like useless in the early stages of the game, but it's like really useful the longer the game goes on. Like especially starting from like 30 minutes, you get like a significant amount of AP, and that will help you obviously with carrying. The more AP you have, the more damage you deal. So when you go like the full scaling rune page here, you could go with Gathering Storm, but if you want to have some more fist fighting power in the early stages of the game, like in laning phase, you could opt with Scorch. But then typically you would go something like Aery, which we're going to talk about later. So if you go Phase Rush, most of the time you're going to want to go with Gathering Storm. Now then, for secondary runes, typically the standard scaling page has always been this, where we go Magical Footwear and Cosmic Insight. And Cosmic Insight makes a lot of sense, right? It makes a lot of sense because, again, it's going to shorten the cooldown on our summoner spells. That's going to be the main thing. So if you have more your Ghost and you have your Flash more, that means you have more movement speed and more mobility, which is obviously going to be useful. So again, scaling setup. Then we have Magical Footwear, also very, it's very logical. We will get free boots of speed basically, so we will save 300 gold, so we will scale quicker, which again is purely based for scaling. The only problem with this here, I would say, with Magical Footwear is, yeah, you can't really run this in every single matchup, as typically when you play versus like mages, you will have mages are typically skill shot oriented, and then you will need to have movement speed to dodge their skill shots. So then rushing boots is amazing, but this literally prevents you from buying boots early on, so then you can't really go boots. Think of something like playing into Cassiopeia, right? If she hits you with 1 Q, she might just completely run you down. So mobility is great to run away when she hits you, but it's also great to dodge the Q initially, and that's going to help you a lot. So then you want to rush boots, and then you can't do it with Magical Footwear, so you might want to opt into a different secondary set of runes here. Now that different set would be, for example, Resolve Tree. Now again, if we go for full scaling in the Resolve Tree, that would mean that we go for as many resistances so that we are as tanky as possible and survive as long as possible towards the later, the mid and late game teamfights. That would mean that we go, for example, Overgrowth, which will literally give us more max health, and Conditioning, which will give us more resistances after 12 minutes into the game. Now, again, this is very much scaling, but sometimes you go into the Resolve Tree, not just for the full scaling, sometimes you need resistances or become a little bit stronger before 12 minutes because the laning phase is so rough. For example, let's say you play into something like an Orianna. And Orianna is a very difficult matchup for Vladimir. She can constantly Q you, constantly QW you, auto-attack you. Very annoying, she has a lot of damage. So in order to survive the laning phase, normally, and get out of laning phase with a good state, you could go, for example, Second Wind here, which is basically going to heal you after taking poke damage, right? So if people constantly poke you, you will heal quite a lot. So this is going to be very, very useful. But sometimes you might be playing versus something with a lot more burst, like a Fizz. A Fizz likes to trade, for example, every 30 seconds. He likes to all-in you with Electrocute combo and deal damage to you. So he doesn't trade for a long time, and then he goes in and does all of his abilities. That's not the same as an Orianna. So into these champions who like to burst you with their full ability rotation, and then wait and then do that again, and those champions, it might be great to go bone plating. Now again, if you don't need bone plating and don't need Second Wind, then you can go with Conditioning, which will make you tankier for mid and late game, but of course keep in mind you won't have the early game resistances then, so make sure that you don't need these ones. Now something else you could go is you could eventually, especially if you go in very hard matchups like Orianna, you could even give up the scaling and go even more lane phase oriented, because this will give you more heal and shield power, but mainly the heal power is very important here, as you will literally sustain more and heal more, which is quite important. This could be useful in one, for the laning phase to just sustain more and be more difficult to kill. 2, also in very long team fights, this could be useful as the healing then is actually going to be quite significant, the extra healing that you're going to get in one team fight. So you could definitely try it out as well. But typically, whenever I don't need to go one of these, I will typically go with this, as this feels super, super ridiculously strong in team fights. So yeah, this is amazing, but like I said, sometimes you just need to go something like this. And then typically if you go Second Wind Revitalize, you're playing in difficult matchups, and then you will switch your Nimbus to Nullifying Orb, for example. So with that being said, there's also another tree you could go into. I don't advise going into the Domination tree. There's not too much here that you could go for. If you wanted to go for here, I would, I really don't go this, but theoretically, I think you could make an argument. You could go, for example, here, extra healing, more sustain in lane, for example, and just extra healing could be useful, and then going Ultimate Hunter to have your ultimate more up. Right? That's one way to look at things. Or sometimes even a Relentless Hunter could be useful to get extra movement speed out of combat, which helps you rotate quicker and maybe flank easier, but it doesn't really feel that good. So I wouldn't really advise you to go Domination Tree right now, but if I were to go it, I believe these are the two main things I would go for, this setup or this setup. Or you could even sometimes probably go Eyeball Collection and then combine this or this, but other than that, I wouldn't really go into the Domination Tree, and even for these things, I wouldn't go into the Domination Tree. I think the other trees are just better. So then the Precision Tree would also be a better tree. So what can you go in here in the Precision Tree? Well, the main thing you could go for here is you could go Legend Haste. Again, we are scaling. Legend Haste gives you, just like Transcendence gives you ability haste, so it's great for team fighting. Now, then here, Last Stand could be great in lane, like if you play versus something like, let's say, you want to scale, you want to play for team fights, but in laning phase you play versus a champion that you will probably fist fight, like before level 6, and you will like get low and stuff like that, like think of things like a Sylas or a Yasuo maybe, then you could go still phase rush, and here you could go Last Stand, for example, because this will give you more damage the lower you are. If you play versus things like Sylas, you will fist fight him, it's almost inevitable, you will become low, and if you're really bound on going phase rush with scaling, then you can pair it up with Last Stand, and that will give you more fist fighting power in lane. And then that's, in those games, that's when you could swap Gathering Storm for Scorch, and then you will have even more damage for the early lane phase. So you see, now you have a mixture of like scaling and early game stats. Now what you could also go for is, for example, cut down. If you like play versus champions with a lot more health than you, this is typically when you play top lane and you play versus things like a Sion, a Cho'Gath, a Mundo, things like that. But other than that, I wouldn't really go here into this tree anymore. That's basically it for phase rush. So then we're gonna reset this to the standard page, and we're just gonna go here to what I would call, so we're just gonna remove this, right? We're gonna remove this page. And then the second page that you could go on Vladimir is the exact opposite of scaling. It's early game aggression, early game damage. And then you would go for something like this. So early game aggression is Aery, Scorch. So the rune page is, the keystone is summon Aery, but I will always refer to it as Aery Scorch, as you typically always combine them. So I call this rune page Aery Scorch. So basically the same, you go for Transcendence here, you go for Transcendence here, and here Nimbus Cloak. But instead of Gathering Storm, you go for more early game damage here. And instead of phase rush, you go for summon Aery. Again, more early game damage. Now summon Aery is great if you can consistently poke the enemy. I get many questions like from people like, why would you not go electrocute? Like, why is Aery better? Well, Aery is, it's like different. Aery is for matchups where you can consistently not only like use abilities on enemies, but like just poke them in general. Like it's very easy for you to hit the enemy consistently. Think of something like a Kiana in the early game, or like a Sylas in the early game. It's very good in those type of matchups. Or like when you play Vladimir in the top lane. Let's say you play Vladimir versus a Garen or something. Like you can constantly attack the Garen. Right? So those are matchups where you can definitely go summon Aery. And it gives you like an insane amount of early game strength here, the Aery Scorch rune page. And then since we go for early game fist fighting, you can obviously go with here, like the Legend Haste, it will feel very, very good. Not only in like for the scaling, but also because you can compare it, like you can pair it up with Last Stand. And Last Stand, again, if you go Aery Scorch, you're planning on fist fighting your opponent. If you fist fight, you might end up low, right? If you tend to fight with opponents, you tend to be lower than usual. And then Last Stand is going to kick in and it's going to give you even more damage. But again, if you play in top lane versus tankier champions, you could swap this out for cut down. But that's basically the main setup here that you would go if you go like this is the main setup that you would go if you play like aggressive Vladimir in the early game. Now you can go also in the other trees. You could go theoretically like Magical Footwear and Cosmic Insight. But this is like aggression and this is scaling, so I wouldn't necessarily advise it. If you go like full scaling, I would rather go for like Phase Rush and Gathering Storm. If you go for aggression, you might as well go full aggression. Right? Something like this. Or you could tap into the Resolve tree and then go here. This will make you stronger in the team fights. Or again, this versus Burst, this versus Poke. Or, for example, in very heavy poke matchups, this is something you could go. Very lane-oriented. Think of something like even like a Fizz. If you really want to play solely for the lane against the Fizz, then Fizz fighting him like you can poke him all the time. So Aery Scorch is amazing. You could theoretically go Nullifying Orb, because it gives you a magic shield, which is great against Fizz. And then you could go Bone Plating against his Burst, and Revitalize for the extra heal power. This is like full lane-oriented Vladimir. I typically don't go this. I typically like to go like Nimbus here and then versus Fizz perhaps go something like this. Because the Legend Haste also scales a little bit better than like the other things in the Resolve tree. So then this is something you could do. Or maybe I would go this. I try to avoid going full laning phase and I try to have some scaling in my runes for sure. As that just feels better. And that's just personal preference. For me it feels better, you know. With that being said, you could also, so we went over this, we went over Resolve tree and we went over the Inspiration tree. So that's basically everything you could do. Again, I wouldn't tap into the Domination tree. But if you were to do it, you could go with Days of Blood, Eyeball Collection, or Days of Blood Ultimate Hunter, Days of Blood Relentless Hunter, or one of these combinations here. But I wouldn't do it, right? It doesn't feel good. I would not advise it, but again, feel free to experiment with it. Then, again, we're going to remove this, and we're going to talk about a different rune page. So, what other rune pages would be viable on Vladimir? Well, so if you take a look at the keystones here, another one that would be viable on Vladimir is going to be Conqueror. So, you could go Conqueror, and what does the Conqueror rune page look like? Typically, Absorb Life. You could go for Triumph, but Absorb Life feels good, right? Because it heals you when you kill minions, for example. Legend Haste, obviously, for the haste. And then again, Last Stand, if you're planning on fist fighting a lot, and if you're planning on getting low, and then cut down against tankier champions. And then typically you're going to want something like this. Now, what's the beautiful thing of this rune page? Why would you go Conqueror? Conqueror is a rune page that you could go, one, if there's a lot of early game fist fighting and long fights, like when you play versus a Yasuo, or when you play top lane versus, like, I don't know, like an Aery or something. Like, you're going to have long fights typically, and especially against melee champions, it's going to be easy to proc your Conqueror and get it to 12 stacks. Right? Now, additionally, I would not just pick it just for lane, I would also pick it if, one, I can use it in my lane, and two, additionally to that, if the enemy team have, like, in general, like a tanky bruiser type team comp where I know I'm going to be using this keystone a lot as well in the mid game and late game team fights. For example, if they have like things like a Set top, a Mumu jungle, Leona support, like these are all melee champions, so you will be able to hit them with your abilities and auto attacks constantly. The fights will take long, they will not one tap you typically, so you will easily be able to get a lot of value out of Conqueror in these games. So if I can use it in my lane versus like a Yasuo or like a Sylas, and it's viable to like use it in mid lane and late game, mid game and late game as well, then I would opt for Conqueror, for example. But keep in mind, for the majority of the Conqueror matchups, you can also go Aery Scorch, with the difference that Aery Scorch will be stronger in lane, and Conqueror will be stronger in the mid game and late game team fights than Aery Scorch. But then typically, yeah, this is what I want to go, like something like this. This will give me more sustain. This will give me Legend Haste, so good scaling. This will give me more fist fighting power, which is great synergy with Conqueror. And then typically Nimbus Cloak for the extra movement speed, and Transcendence again because ability haste is so important on Vladimir. Now, you could also swap this out, the Nimbus Cloak, to like Gathering Storm. And then you have like even more scaling. Only thing is, you will lack a little bit of movement speed when you like activate your sums, for example. And if they have like a full range team comp, Nimbus Cloak might be so valuable that you will get more value out of this, because this will allow you to, like, when you ghost or flash onto an enemy team, you will get onto them and actually get your damage off. Whereas if you go Gathering Storm, you might have more AP, but you might not get onto the enemy team and you can't even kill them, so then you're nothing but the AP. So if they have like a full range team comp or like a difficult team comp to get onto, then Nimbus Cloak is definitely a good way to go. So I go this in like 99% of my games, but theoretically you could go something like this. And if you want to go even more early game, you could theoretically also go Transcendent Scorch, but it's not something I like. If I'm planning on going Scorch, then I'm not really going for Conqueror anyway, then I want to go Aery Scorch in general anyway. So typically when Conqueror, you go this, or you go this. This is my go-to Conqueror page. Now, you could theoretically, like, I wouldn't go into the inspiration tree with this page, but you could theoretically go into the resolve tree. And then the main thing that you would do is go this. And especially I would say like before they came up with Legend Haste, you always were forced when you went Conqueror to go with the sorcery tree because you needed Transcendence. And then you could still opt for either Nimbus or for Gathering. But you needed Transcendence because you didn't have an ability haste option here in the precision tree. And now you could say, okay, that means that nowadays, now that we have this ability haste option here, we don't need it here. So we could go more into resolve tree and, for example, make ourselves tankier for those mid-game team fights and go this. Well, yes, that's theoretically true. But now on split 3, they nerfed like a lot of ability haste on items, like Ionian Boots, for example. So I like to go Sorcery Shoes right now. That means I have less ability haste. And then if I went to go Conqueror, I would still go Transcendence. Like the need for going and Legend Haste and Transcendence now has increased due to Riot Games basically like removing ability haste partially from the game. Like they nerfed a lot of ability haste items in the game, such as Ionian boots. So like I feel like there's an increasing need to go like these two right now. So that means you're still kind of forced to go like the sorcery tree here on Conqueror page. But that's my view on it. You could try to go something like this. I'm not saying it's going to be super bad, but this feels a lot better in my opinion. With that being said, that's it for the Conqueror page. Now, what other pages do we have? Wait, let me remove this. So what other pages do we have other than Conqueror, Aery, and Face Rush? Not that many. Back in the day, we had the Electrocute rune page. It doesn't feel good. And I could show it to you, but it doesn't feel good. I wouldn't go it right now. I haven't gone it in like, I don't know, like a year or more. So there's really not anything I can tell you guys about Electrocute. It doesn't feel good. Like I've not consistently went it for a year, but like I have tried it last year for sure, but I just don't like it. So there's not really a point in showing it. I don't think it's a good right now. Now, something that might be good, and that is actually good, that I know is good, is you can go Grasp. Now, many people, so Elite 500, obviously every Vladimir player knows him by now. He basically invented the WMax Vladimir build, where you sustain a lot with your pool. And with that came along the Grasp build. But many people think, therefore, that now when WMax is gone, like they nerfed it into the ground, that Grasp isn't viable anymore. But Grasp was viable even before the WMax. Right? Many people just didn't know it. So Grasp is still viable and was viable before the WMax. And the way Grasp typically looks like is something like this. Like this is the scaling setup you could go for Grasp. Now, what is Grasp? What's the purpose of going this? Well, I like to go this in matchups where I can hit them consistently, but I can't kill them. And now you might ask, wait, what? If you can hit an enemy consistently, how is it not possible to kill them? Like, couldn't you just go Aery Scorch? Well, no. So, for example, let's think of something like a Mundo or like a Nasus. Like, Nasus is a great example. Like, especially mid lane. Nowadays, he's played mid lane a lot. It's very difficult to run him down as the lane is so short. So, like, you don't have all this time to kill him, right? So, it's more difficult to kill him. So, with Aery Scorch, even if you go Aery Scorch and you constantly bully him, the lane is not long enough to run him down typically, so he can just recall whenever, and you don't get that much value out of your Aery Scorch. But even if you play him top lane action. Now, if you go Grasp, you can constantly attack Nasus and constantly proc your Grasp, and you get one, free healing from it, but also like free max health increase from the Grasp. So, because this gives you, for the people who don't know, this permanently increases your health. So if you can consistently attack people, you get like free scaling, you get literally permanently increased health. So you get free scaling from this. So in matchups where you can consistently hit them, but you can't kill them, so you wouldn't go Aery Scorch, you might as well go Grasp. So typically, like, I like to go this mainly into like something like a Nasus. But you could even go this like into, like, I don't know, like an Akali or something, like in the mid lane, like, because Akali is typically very difficult to kill. You could even go it into her, right? There's many matchups in which you could go this, in which you can get like free scaling without having to kill your opponent, and you typically do that in matchups where it's difficult to kill your opponent, even though you can consistently hit them. So with that being said, obviously, if you know that this increases permanently your health, then you definitely want to go Overgrowth here, as this will also permanently increase your max health. So that's an amazing synergy. So it makes you quite tanky for team fights. It's basically like the same as when you go into Resolve, you go Conditioning Overgrowth. This makes you tanky in team fights. With the extra increased health of Grasp of the Undying, you're even tankier. And obviously you get more sustain in lane as well. But I don't really go it for the sustain, I typically go it more for the scaling. And then here you have multiple options, right? But theoretically, like, this is the only one that works for Vladimir, so then Demolish is the one we will take. So yeah. Also, typically, like, matchups in which you can consistently poke enemies, but you can't really kill them, like a Nasus. In the early game, you can push them under the turret. It's just difficult to kill them, but you can push them under the turret, and then you can get some Demolish procs off, and hopefully get some plates. Now, here I haven't experimented too much with like the secondary rune pages. The problem is you have 0 ability haste here. So you could, like, I don't see an opportunity here to go into this tree, or definitely not to go into Domination tree, but also not to go in Inspiration tree, because you need Transcendence in my opinion. And then if you go full scaling, this is a full scaling setup basically for team fights, you might as well go here, Gathering Storm. You could also opt for Nimbus Cloak and Transcendence, again if they have like a very long range team comp. But if they don't, then I would go for Transcendence Gathering Storm, as this is also a very great scaling setup. It's like Phase Rush is also scaling, but this is more in matchups where you can constantly poke them. Phase Rush is typically picked in difficult matchups where they can run you down, and then Phase Rush helps you escape from them. And it's also great in team fights. Now here, theoretically, I haven't tried this yet, but theoretically you would be able to go into the Precision Tree, select Legend Haste, this would also solve your haste issue, and then potentially you could go with something like Last Stand or Cut Down, but you can see that this makes less sense. This makes less sense. Why? We're going this for scaling, Grasp, because we have difficulty in killing our opponent. If we have difficulty in killing our opponent, we're typically like we can consistently poke them, but we can't really kill them. Those are matches like Nasus, who typically can't also kill us. So then it doesn't really make sense to go like Cut Down or Last Stand. We're going to get increased damage versus them, but we won't be able to kill them anyway, typically. So then, in my opinion, it's just better to go Transcendence Gathering Storm, if that makes sense. Now that's everything for the rune pages. So basically, standard scaling, Phase Rush against matchups who can run you down. Then we go Aery Scorch in matchups where you can easily poke them, both top and mid lane. And then Conqueror, we go into matchups where in the early game we're going to fist fight a lot, like a Sylas or Yasuo. And it's also good in mid game where they have like many bruiser, tanky type of champions, preferably melee type of champions, where you can constantly proc your Conqueror. And then I think that's it. So we talked about Conqueror, Phase Rush, Aery, and then yeah, we have Grasp, typically for champions that we can constantly attack, and we get free scaling, but it's still difficult to kill them, so Aery Scorch wouldn't make sense. So then typically, back in the day, we would have gone Grasp, but I feel like we would have gone Phase Rush, but Grasp is also right now a very great option into those matchups. Nonetheless, like I said, into Nasus, you don't have to go Grasp, you can also go like Phase Rush, because it also scales well, and he can also run you down at some point, once he has enough stacks, and then this will also help you survive. So it's like personal preference. Do you go Grasp into Nasus, do you go Phase Rush? It's personal preference. I would typically go Grasp into Nasus if the rest of his team isn't that like difficult to get onto or to stick onto. If the rest of his team is difficult to get onto, if they have like a very long range combo like Caitlyn, Janna or something, and then like a mid lane like a Xerath or a Valkos, then I would go Grasp and I would go Phase Rush, for example, because this will not only help me versus Nasus, but also versus his team. Right? So that's something to think about. But I try to give you guys as many examples as possible of matchups. I try to explain the rune pages as good as possible. So hopefully this helps you guys a lot. Now what we're going to do here is I'm going to go into the shop and we're going to talk about some champions here and what rune page I would go versus those champions. Because it's one thing to talk about runes and to say, hey, this is a great matchup, or like this is a great rune page versus this matchup, but I kind of want to show you what I would go versus some champions. So for example, let's just scroll champions here. So I'm going to order them from Blue Essence or something. It's going to make it easier to look at. And we're going to look at the mid laners, obviously. So for example, the first mid laner, like let's look at classes. So the first class that we would have is like something like mages, like a Syndra, an Orianna, or like a Lux, right? Like a Lux. So what could you pick into that class of mages, like Syndra, Orianna, Lux? What could you go? So we're going to go to the, I think it's, wait, where is it? So on my account, the runes, yeah, here it is. Okay. So what would you go into mages like Lux, Orianna, Syndra? Well, typically, you can't really fist fight them early on. So we're going to go with Phase Rush. Right? Because you can't, there's no point in going Aery Scorch because you can't get that close to constantly poke them. Also, Grasp doesn't work because it's scaling, but we can't constantly poke them, so we don't have a lot of value from that. Conqueror also doesn't work because we can't consistently use it in lane, like we can't even get it to 12 stacks because there's no way we're gonna like fight the Lux that long. So then Phase Rush is the one that makes the most sense, right? So then we go for scaling, as we can't really kill our opponents anyway. We can go with Nimbus Cloak for more range, for that movement speed, Transcendence for the ability haste, Gathering Storm for the scaling, and then you could go with something like this, Magical Footwear or Cosmic Insight. That's very greedy. I would personally not do it, but you can go it into those matchups, but I wouldn't do it because Syndra, Orianna, Lux matchups, they tend to poke you a lot and you will probably suffer a lot. And then you will typically need Second Wind to heal from their damage that they will constantly do to you with their abilities from their consistent poke. and then Overgrowth for more scaling. Now, if you need even more help, you can also, like, full lane, you could go like Revitalize instead of Overgrowth, and Nullifying Orb instead of Nimbus Cloak. But personally, I don't need it, so I just go this, and if I have Second Wind, those matchups definitely feel playable. So that's something you could go into like a Lux, Syndra, or Orianna. Now, let's look again in the shop here, and let's look again at champions from a different class. So Annie is basically like, let's see, like I want to find another one, like Zed or Yasuo. For example, let's start with Zed. What do you go into Zed? Zed is an assassin. So let's think of champions like what is a class he belongs to? That class would be assassin. So Zed, Fizz, maybe Katarina, those type of champions. So let's take a look at that. What would you go into those champions? Typically, into those assassins, they are very weak early on and they are melee. So you can go bully them early on with like Aery Scorch. Aery Scorch is definitely fine, right? The problem is like into Zed specifically can trade consistently with his Qs and WQ, and he's like a relatively ranged champion. And then it might be difficult to constantly hit your summon Aery. So then into Zed specifically, you could either opt for Conqueror, because you will not be able to trade with him consistently, but you might have some long trades with him. What I prefer more though, and because I feel like going Conqueror is more of a stretch, Zed's like to like constantly burst you, and you won't have many all-in angles. So what I personally would enjoy the most is going something like Phase Rush, and then maybe add Scorch to it to have a bit of fist fight power. But Aery, you won't proc it enough. You won't proc it enough. If he plays safe and early, and then he plays around his WEQ combos, you won't be able to constantly hit him, so you won't get enough value out of Aery. So Phase Rush is good, but then you could go Scorch for the one times that you do trade with him, you do have some extra fist fighting power. So this could be a great setup, and then obviously you could go something like Last Stand and Legend Haste. This is scaling, and Last Stand is obviously great into Zed because, yeah, you will typically, like, both of you will fight quite a bit, especially around 6, and then you might get low, and then you're going to get quite some value from Last Stand. But it's not a necessity. You could also go for Bone Plating if you struggle in this matchup, and then Overgrowth. Personally, I don't need it. I don't feel like this matchup is that difficult. I wouldn't say it's that easy, but it's not that difficult. So I would go with something more like this. So that's what I would go into, like Zed, into like more, I would say like assassin, like real assassin types, or like roaming types, like a Fizz or a Katarina, like the very true melee champions who really need to get onto you in order to like trade with you. You could go Aery Scorch. Then this setup is amazing. Like going Aery Scorch with the Last Stand is going to be great against Fizz and Katarinas. If you're scared of like Fizz's all-in burst damage, you could always go with Bone Plating. Overgrowth obviously for the scaling, and against Fizz, since he's AP damage, you could also go Nullifying Orb. But again, I don't feel like you need all of this, so I just go Aery Scorch, and then I go more fist fighting power with Last Stand, as I feel like the matchup is quite easy. But hopefully you get like an idea of what you could go in these type of assassins. So that is a bit of an exception actually, but like into most assassins, they're melee, they have to walk up to the lane. Like even a Sylas, you could easily go this. And then Sylas, again, this is personal preference. Sylas is like Fizz takes, and Katarina take very short trades with you. So the Aery Scorch is really good. You can constantly poke them, and when they go in, you can also poke them with this. Sylas is typically someone that takes longer trades with you, so then Conqueror is obviously better. And then you could obviously go with this setup here. And then into Zed, he's more of a specific assassin, like I said, so then typically you want to go Phase Rush, as you don't really get that much value out of summon Aery, but you can go Scorch. Something like this. But you don't have to, of course. You can choose whatever you like, but this is my personal preference. Now let's go into some more matchups here. So we're going to go into the list again and see if there's any other classes that we can take a look at. So maybe Xerath, like Xerath, Vel'Koz, Ziggs, those are all the same champions. We call them artillery mages, like very long range mages. So what you can do then, what I do in those mages is, again, we can't really fist fight them. Like, it's very difficult to get onto them. So in those matchups, I like to go Phase Rush for scaling, because there's no way I'm going to kill a Vel'Koz. He has too much range. So I'm just going to go Phase Rush and full scaling with Nimbus Cloak, Transcendence, and Gathering Storm. Now these long mages like Xerath, Ziggs, and Vel'Koz, they might have quite some poke. So then I typically go Second Wind and Overgrowth. And this is going to be my go-to setup. Now, what you could also do, you could sometimes go Fist Fight runes. I don't like it, but you could sometimes go fistfight runes. Because with most of these artillery mages, like Xerath for example, if you stand next to the wave, they have to choose. Do I hit the wave or do I hit the Vladimir? So then you just walk up and you make them choose. Like if you walk up and they go for the wave with their spell shot, with their skill shot, now you just hit them constantly with your poke. So that's one way to approach the matchup. But typically, the lot easier setup and just free scaling in those matchups is just something I like to do like this. And you could even go this if you're not scared of getting poked too much. But personally, I've experienced like into good Xeraths, into good Ziggs, into good Valkos. It's very useful to go second wind. So yeah, you can definitely use that. That's my personal preference again. So that's it for artillery mages. This is my typical standard setup in artillery mages. Then again, let's look at the shop and maybe I can see other champions. So we went over like mages, artillery mages, assassins so far. But other than that, I don't think there's too much we have to cover. I don't see too many like champions. Like Vex is basically also like kind of like maybe like slightly a burst mage, but she's also like you could just go phase rush and scaling. Let me see. Talon again. Into Talon you can constantly poke him, so you could easily go like Aery Scorch. I mean, I don't really see any weird matchups here. Heimerdinger, I basically see this as a control mage where he just wants to scale and poke you constantly, so you definitely go phase rush with second wind. So yeah, nothing too special here. Aery and Victor are also like kind of control mages where you can just go scaling. But Aery is a specific one. In Aery, I like to go Aery Scorch with Last Stand, as I feel like Aery isn't that long range. Her Q is long range, but if she does it on the wave and you stand next to the wave properly, you can easily punish her whenever she doesn't have it, as it's quite a long cooldown. Because I feel like in the Aery, if you just trade with Aery Scorch, constantly trade with her, you just win. So to Aery, I like to go Aery Scorch with Last Stand and Legend Haste. Into Victor, you could go Phase Rush. I also like to go Aery Scorch into Victor and then Second Wind and Resolve with Overgrowth. But you could go into Victor, you could go Phase Rush for sure and just a scaling way. Again, it's personal preference. But those are the two main setups you could go into him. Then let's see, Nico, I don't really play against Nico anymore, but it's like, it used to be a very annoying matchup, like so go second wind secondary, phase rush full scaling. Same against Orianna. I don't think I'm missing somebody here. Into Cassiopeia, like these are champions who can run you down, like some champions can easily run you down, like a Cassiopeia. In top lane, think of things like Rumble or Irelia or a Kayle or a Nasus. In those matchups, like you typically want to go phase rush, and then you could go full scaling, and then in secondary runes maybe like Resolve with second wind or bone plating overgrowth, depending on the matchup. But those are like the main matchups that I see, specifically for mid lane as well. But in top lane, you're typically going to go Aery Scorch with Last Stand anyway, and Legend Haste. But for mid lane, yeah, there's more variety, I would say. So that's it, guys. That's everything for the runes here. If you guys have any questions, let me know in the comments down below. But other than that, I think we went over everything, and hopefully you learned something. So feel free to leave a like and subscribe on your way out, and I hope to see you in my next video.